Well, overseas now, and more than 300,000 people in the US state of Florida have lost power as Hurricane Helene tracks towards the coast. For more on this, Matthew Petty, a radio host at WUSF Radio, joins me now from Tampa in Florida. Matthew, thank you for your time.
Sure.
Now, forecasters are warning that Helene could bring, and I'll quote, catastrophic storm surge and life-threatening winds to Florida's Big Bend area. Before we look at what it's going to look like when it touches down on land, what are the conditions currently like?
Well, in the Big Bend area, the current conditions are pretty bad. I mean, this is a massive storm. It's been sort of trucking its way up northwards through the Gulf of Mexico all this afternoon. It's a Category 4 hurricane, so it has maximum sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. It's going to have gusts of higher than that, and it's moving at about 24 miles an hour. So it's moving along at a pretty good clip. Some of those bands from the eye are starting to sort of make their way onshore. So it's expected to make landfall fairly soon in the Big Bend area. And as you mentioned, catastrophic conditions. I mean, the hurricane forecasters were predicting storm surge of up to 20 feet in some places in that Big Bend area. So that's like the height of a two-story house. It's unsurvivable. That's how they're describing it. So this is a really big storm, a very dangerous storm.
Which are the areas that are in the eye of the storm that will bear the brunt of this?
Well, it's the kind of rural counties. I mean, the storm is kind of projected to head a little bit west of Tallahassee. It's the capital of Florida. Good news for Tallahassee because the worst of the storm is on the eastern side of it, but a lot of folks still in the path of the storm. And as I said, it's really big. I mean, a little earlier in your program, you played the clip of Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, and he was talking about the preparations Georgia is making for the storm. So it's going to be a powerful storm even after it leaves Florida. I mean, at one point you had the wind field from Hurricane Helene stretching all the way from Miami up into Georgia. This is a really big storm and a lot of folks in the path of it.
How are people being told to prepare? I believe that many are already attending evacuation centres.
Yeah, I mean, folks are being told to evacuate. I mean, if they haven't evacuated already, it may be too late, but people were being told to evacuate. There have been a number of other storms in recent years, Hurricane Ian 2 years ago, Hurricane Idalia last year. So folks along the Gulf Coast of Florida are kind of familiar with some of these storms, and they tend to take them seriously when they're told to evacuate. At least that's what we've been hearing from officials. Not always going to evacuation centers, sometimes just moving 10, 20, 30 miles away just to get out of the storm surge area to friends or family, but taking this seriously and heeding the warnings to get out of the path of the storm.
We were just seeing some of those NASA satellite images of the storm. It looks very foreboding. How I asked you before, like, how it's currently impacting areas. I mean, we've heard that some residents, there's up to 600,000 in Florida that are without power.
Yeah, more than 600,000, in fact, and many of those are in those coastal areas. Like, as I said, even though the storm is making landfall in the Big Bend area, it's about 190 miles sort of north of Tampa, where I am. Because the rain bands and the wind bands are stretching so far out from the center, the eye of the storm, it's really having a big impact. So it's not just storm surge. The wind is knocking out power. It's sort of knocking down trees and causing issues there. Flooding is going to be a big concern as well. So folks are being warned that even when the storm has passed, they're going to have to be especially careful, especially if there's sort of the floodwaters around. Make sure they don't wade into anything because there can be some pretty nasty stuff in terms of nasty critters or infectious situations in those floodwaters, down power lines. So a dangerous situation in the days to come, no doubt, for a lot of the folks who are worst affected. I
was reading that there's a state of emergency that's been declared in 61 of Florida's 67 counties. You may have an updated number on that. Several are under evacuation orders. Do you get a sense that there is comfort in how the authorities will be responding to this?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the folks in the path of the storm, this isn't their first hurricane. Well, for many of them, it's not their first hurricane. Of course, Florida does have a lot of in-migration from other states. So for some folks, it may be the first time they're riding out a storm of this magnitude. But, we've been getting messaging from authorities throughout the day that they've had folks staging, ready to help people evacuate. We heard from emergency officials in the Tampa Bay region earlier this evening that they had people ready to make water rescues if they had to. Of course, hoping that they don't get to that situation, but there are folks in position to do that if necessary. Also, power, as you mentioned, more than 600,000 people without power currently. In situations like this, oftentimes lines crews will come in from out of state and be ready to go, in the areas where the storm is going to make that big impact, so that they can get to work just as soon as they can, clear the fallen trees and get people connected as quickly as possible.